Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Today I continue exploring the differences between the theatrical and extended versions of the Harry Potter films. This time we turn to Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, perhaps the most abundant entry in the series when it comes to deleted and totally changed scenes, both in number and in importance. Many of these moments, cut or changed during editing, could have made the story deeper, more emotional, and more immersive. So let's take a closer look. Number 1. Borgin and Burke's. Travelling by flue powder requires precision, and Harry's first attempt ends in failure. Instead of Diagon Alley, he lands in a dark magic shop. Borgin and Burke's. The released version trimmed this scene heavily, but the extended cut offers much more depth. Lucius and Draco Malfoy enter the shop. Due to increased ministry inspections, Lucius plans to sell a few questionable items. Harry, overhearing their conversation, hides inside the vanishing cabinet, the very same one that later becomes crucial in The Half-Blood Prince. This is also where Draco first notices the cursed opal necklace, the same one that will later nearly kill Katie Bell. According to legend, this necklace took the lives of 19 muggles. Careful, it's cursed, Draco snickers, peering through the glass. Harry memorizes the moment. Later, he'll recall it and feel certain that Malfoy is involved in something sinister. Cutting this scene weakened the story's continuity. It was the link that connected the second and sixth films. Number 2, the Quickspell course. After his punishment for flying the enchanted Ford Anglia, Harry notices that Filch has dropped an envelope labelled Quickspell, a correspondence course in beginner's magic. A short but touching moment, it reveals that Filch is a squib, a non-magical person born to wizarding parents, desperately trying to learn magic but failing. In the book, the scene is even more developed. Filch catches Harry for muddy footprints, but when Peeves interrupts, Harry spots the letter. When Filch realizes Harry has seen it, he blushes and lets him go without punishment. You read it? Filch stammers. No! Harry lies quickly. Filch's pale face turns red. He locks the letter in a drawer and mutters, "Go on then," and not a word to anyone. By removing this scene, the filmmakers lost one of the story's most humane notes, a touch of compassion for a man who spends his life yearning for the impossible. Number 3. The pudding scene. Remember the flying pudding. Dobby's attempt to save Harry only worsens his situation with the Dursleys. But in the director's cut, the scene was longer. After the dessert floats across the room, the Dursleys try desperately to pretend nothing unusual is happening. Interestingly, in the book, the pudding falls to the floor, not on Mrs. Mason's head, and Harry doesn't even try to catch it. This short but vivid moment added a layer of absurd humour and quiet despair. The perfect opening for another year when magic once again destroys Harry's fragile normality. Number 4. Let's start with a little quiz. Gilderoy Lockhart, played by Kenneth Branagh, is one of the film's brightest highlights, yet his vanity could have been portrayed even more brilliantly. Before unleashing the Cornish pixies, he gives his students a little quiz. Every question, of course, about himself. What is my favourite colour? What is my greatest ambition? What do I consider my greatest achievement? Naturally, Hermione is the only one to score full marks while the rest of the class barely contain their laughter. It's a pity this comedic moment was cut. It perfectly showcased Lockhart's narcissism and made his downfall later in the film even funnier. Number 5. Whispers in the Library. This scene, taken directly from the book, was shortened in the final film. Harry overhears Ernie Macmillan and Hannah Abbott whispering that he must be the heir of Slytherin. "Hi," says Harry calmly. "Have you seen Justin?" "Why do you want him?" Ernie asks nervously. "I just want to explain what happened in the dueling club." "We saw it ourselves," blurts Ernie. This small exchange deepened the growing sense of paranoia at Hogwarts, showing how fear and rumour can isolate even the most unlikely suspect. Number 6, the heir of Slytherin, Fred and George. Another brilliant mix of comedy and drama, and another victim of editing. Fred and George Weasley can't resist teasing Harry, loudly announcing, "Make way for the heir of Slytherin. Beware the evil Harry Potter!" Students scatter in alarm, but Harry is no longer amused. The rumours are taking hold and self-doubt begins to creep in. Hermione tries to reassure him. The polyjuice potion is almost ready, and soon they'll uncover the truth. This scene added humour, yes, but also emphasised Harry's growing loneliness amid the whispers. Number 7, unsportsmanlike conduct. I hate Slytherin. The Quidditch match against Slytherin was originally even more spectacular. In a deleted sequence, Harry, chased by the rogue bludger, flies straight through the Slytherin stands, smashing barriers and scattering terrified students. The editors likely deemed it too dangerous and too unsporting, perhaps wisely. Still, it could have been one of the most breathtaking moments in the entire franchise. Number 8, Duel Club, alternate cut. In the original version of the dueling club scene, the chaos begins even before the duels start. Gilderoy Lockhart, eager to demonstrate what he calls his signature defensive flourish, waves his wand with theatrical flair and accidentally ignites the stage curtain. Smoke fills the hall. Filch rushes in with a bucket, shouting, "Not again!" The students burst into laughter while Snape stands in the background, his arms crossed, eyes narrowed in silent despair. The moment perfectly captures Lockhart's vanity and Snape's quiet contempt, setting the tone for what follows, a duel that turns deadly serious. When the snake slithers toward Justin Finch-Fletchley, Harry's first reaction isn't calm. He shouts, "Impedimenta!" But the spell fizzles uselessly. The snake keeps advancing, hissing. Only then does Harry cry out instinctively, or in Parseltongue. The room falls silent. In the book, Rowling writes he hadn't realized what he'd done until he saw the horror on everyone's faces. The deleted version makes this even clearer. Harry isn't summoning dark power. He's acting out of pure fear. By removing this failed spell, the film lost a subtle but powerful detail, that Harry's link to the serpent was accidental, not evil. Number 9, visit to the hospital wing. In the deleted hospital wing visit scene, Harry and Hermione quietly enter the ward late at night. The moonlight filters through the high windows, casting pale light on the rows of beds. At the far end lies Colin Creevey, small and motionless, his camera still hanging from his frozen hands. Madame Pomfrey whispers, "He's petrified but alive. Poor boy, still warm, as if only sleeping." She adjusts his blanket gently, as though he could wake at any moment. Harry stands beside the bed, staring at Colin's pale face. It's no longer just a mystery to solve in someone he knows has truly suffered. Hermione touches Harry's arm and says softly, "We'll find out who did this." But Harry doesn't answer. In the book, Rowling writes, he felt cold all over, as though the chill of the hospital wing had crept inside him. That feeling defines the moment. The danger isn't distant anymore. It's real, breathing down his neck. The scene would have marked Harry's turning point from a curious boy to a protector of others. It was short, quiet, and deeply human, perhaps too heavy for a children's film, but one of the most emotionally honest moments ever written for Chamber of of Secrets. Number 10. Flourish and Blots, the Malfoys' Scuffle. The scene at Flourish and Blots could have been one of the film's most powerful confrontations. The bookstore is crowded and noisy, filled with fans of Gilderoy Lockhart. Arthur Weasley, holding a stack of Lockhart's books, bumps into Lucius Malfoy. Their polite smiles vanish instantly. In the deleted version, Malfoy leans closer and says coldly, "You Weasleys disgrace not only the ministry but magic itself. Poverty is not a virtue." The words sting. Arthur straightens his back, his face flushing with anger. You can feel years of resentment and rivalry boiling between them. Two fathers standing for completely different worlds. Then for the first time, young Ginny Weasley steps forward. Her voice trembles but doesn't break. "And you're a disgrace to all wizards, Mr. Malfoy." Lucius turns sharply, his eyes narrowing. For a moment there's silence in the shop. Even the enchanted books seem to stop rustling. The camera was meant to linger on Ginny's small, determined face, contrasting her courage with Malfoy's cold superiority. It's a brief exchange, but it plants an invisible thread between them, the same two people, soon to be bound by Tom Riddle's diary. Director Chris Columbus later admitted the line was cut to avoid revealing that connection too early. Still, fans who read the original script see this missing moment as essential. It showed that Ginny's bravery existed long before she ever set foot in the Chamber of Secrets, and it revealed that Lucius Malfoy's cruelty wasn't just political, it was personal, aimed at anyone who dared to defy him, no matter how small or young they were. Number 11. Evening in the Gryffindor Common Room. The deleted evening in the Gryffindor Common Room scene was meant to be a quiet moment after the chaos of classes. Rain lashes the windows while thunder rolls over the castle. The fire crackles warmly, throwing soft light across the red and gold walls. Hermione sits cross-legged on the rug, surrounded by potion books and bubbling flasks. With her wand, she lights floating candles that drift above them like tiny stars. "You have to stir clockwise, then counterclockwise," she tells Ron and Harry, her tone both serious and proud. Ron frowns at the cauldron. "Looks like soup gone wrong," he mutters, making Harry laugh. As they work, the scene lingers on the small details. Crookshanks curled up by the fire, rain streaming down the tall windows, and the trio's laughter echoing softly through the common room. For a moment, they're not heroes or students facing danger. They're just friends, learning together, trusting each other. It's the kind of warm, magical domesticity the films rarely had time for. In the book, Rowling often paused the action for these moments. The firelight flickered on their faces, and for once, the castle felt like home. The scene would have brought that same intimacy to the screen. Emma Watson later said in an interview that she missed this scene most of all. "It made us feel like a family," she recalled. "That was exactly the tone it carried. The calm before the storm, when friendship felt stronger than fear. Without it, the film moves faster, but loses a bit of that everyday magic that made Hogwarts feel real. Not just a place of danger and spells, but a home filled with light, laughter, and the sound of rain against the glass." Number 12. Tom Riddle's Diary, Extended Memory. In the extended version of the Tom Riddle's Diary scene, Harry's vision of the past is longer and far darker. When he opens the diary, the ink begins to swirl, pulling him into a memory like a whirlpool. He lands in a dim corridor of Hogwarts 50 years earlier. Students rush past, whispering. Somewhere, a girl screams. Harry runs toward the sound and stops in front of the girl's bathroom. the one that later becomes Moaning Myrtle's haunt. Inside, a small body lies on the floor. The camera lingers only for a second, but long enough for the audience to see the terror frozen on her face. Tom Riddle stands nearby, silent, his expression unreadable. He kneels next to Professor Armando Dippet, who says in a trembling voice, "We may have to close the school, Tom. The board will insist." Riddle looks up, his tone calm and measured. "If you expel Hagrid, sir, the attacks will stop. Hogwarts will be safe again." There's no trace of emotion, no fear, no pity, only calculation. The scene shows not a scared student, but a young man rehearsing manipulation. It's the birth of Voldemort's mask, a charming face that hides a ruthless mind. In the book, Rowling describes the moment as a boy about 16, handsome, with dark hair and eyes, standing at the top of the stairs, watching. The extended scene follows that image perfectly. The light flickers on his face, half in shadow, half in gold. Harry realizes that this is not just a memory, it's a warning. The past is trying to speak to him. Riddle's eyes meet his, and for a heartbeat, Harry feels that the diary is alive, watching him back. The scene was cut for tone. Director Chris Columbus later said it was too grim for a family film. Yet many fans believe it would have added crucial depth. It would have shown Tom Riddle not as a ghostly echo, but as a living threat, already clever, already dangerous. The Chamber of Secrets wouldn't have been just a mystery. It would have been a tragedy repeating itself, one child haunted by the shadow of another. Number 13, Moaning. Myrtle, extended scene. The deleted scene with Moaning Myrtle would have changed the way we see her forever. Instead of meeting her only in the bathroom, Harry, Ron, and Hermione were meant to encounter her earlier, floating through the dim corridor near the girls' lavatory. Myrtle drifts above them, her round glasses glinting in the torchlight. She sniffles, wiping ghostly tears from her cheeks. "Everyone laughs at me," she moans, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "Even the other ghosts, even the fat friar." Ron shifts awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable. Hermione, ever kind, tries to comfort her, but Myrtle only wails louder before vanishing into the wall. That small exchange would have given her more than comic relief. It would have made her human, or rather, heartbreakingly, close to human. She isn't just a shrieking spirit who startles students in the bathroom. She's a lonely girl, frozen forever at the age of 14. In the book, Harry later learns that Myrtle was killed after seeing the basilisk's eyes. She says, "I died in this very stall. I remember seeing a pair of great big yellow eyes." The earlier corridor scene would have added weight to those words, showing her isolation long before her death is revealed. Director Chris Columbus once said that the scene was cut because the film was already running too long, but fans have always disagreed with that choice. For them, this moment showed why Myrtle is one of Hogwarts' saddest stories, a girl who longed to be noticed in life and could only be remembered in death. Removing the scene made her seem like a ghostly joke instead of a tragedy wrapped in tears. Imagine how differently the audience might have felt during the memory of her death. When Tom Riddle's diary later shows the event, it would no longer be just a mystery being solved. It would be the fall of someone we'd already come to pity. That extra glimpse of Myrtle in the corridor would have turned her from background character into something much more haunting, the embodiment of every lonely soul who ever wandered Hogwarts' endless halls, still waiting to be heard. Number 14. Dinner in the Great Hall after the attack. The deleted scene known as Dinner in the Great Hall after the attack shows Hogwarts at its most silent. Students sit in rows, barely touching their food. The clinking of cutlery echoes across the long tables. Even Fred and George Weasley, usually unable to stay quiet for more than a moment, stare down at their plates. Fear hangs in the air. Everyone is waiting, but no one knows for what. The candles above flicker as if the castle itself feels uneasy. Then Albus Dumbledore rises from his seat. His voice, calm yet powerful, fills the hall. Darkness cannot win while there is light in our hearts. The words are simple, but they cut through the silence like a spell. Some students look up. Hermione grips Harry's sleeve, her eyes wide with both fear and hope. In that moment he feels how much the school depends on Dumbledore's strength, and how fragile that light truly is. As the students begin to whisper again, Professor McGonagall quietly approaches. She leans toward Harry and Hermione, her tone low and urgent. "Did you notice anything, Potter? Any sign? Any clue?" Harry shakes his head. For the first time, he realizes the professors are just as lost as the students. The grown-ups don't have the answers anymore. That realization frightens him more than the attack itself. This scene, though short, deepened the film's sense of dread. It showed Hogwarts not as a magical fortress, but as a living place, trembling under an invisible threat. It echoed the line from the book where Dumbledore says, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are." By removing this moment, the filmmakers kept the tone lighter, but they lost a haunting glimpse of what fear can do, even inside the safest place in the wizarding world. Number 15. Opening the Chamber. First version. The Chamber of Secrets was never meant to be revealed in the way we know it today. When the filmmakers of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets first approached the climactic scene, the opening of the chamber, they envisioned something darker, longer, and far more mysterious. Early versions of the script written by Steve Kloves contained passages that would have transformed this moment into a haunting exploration of Hogwarts' hidden history. What was finally shown on screen, a breathtaking yet straightforward descent into the depths, was, in truth, a trimmed echo of a much richer sequence. In the lost version, the journey toward the chamber's entrance held symbols, messages, and traces of Salazar Slytherin's legacy that blurred the line between myth and memory. It began not with the door, but with the silence. Harry and Ron, wandering through the dimly lit bathroom of Moaning Myrtle, were meant to pause before the sinks in eerie confusion. The script described how their wands trembled slightly as they picked up faint vibrations in the walls, as if something ancient was breathing just beyond them. A series of long, glistening trails covered the stone floor, marks that looked like slime, yet reflected the light in serpentine patterns. The boys knelt beside them, realizing these were not random stains, but the residue of a creature far larger than any snake they had ever imagined. The camera would have lingered there, following the trails as they spiraled upward toward the ceiling, revealing faint scratches carved into the stone, as if claws or scales had brushed against it centuries ago. In this version, the moment carried a feeling of archaeological discovery. The audience was not simply witnessing the opening of a secret door, but entering a forgotten myth. Harry's curiosity would have drawn him to the runes carved into the wall behind the sinks. They were described as dark, twisting letters like vines choking the stone. He raised his wand and whispered, "Lumos Maxima." The light flared, revealing symbols that matched those in the restricted section of the library, the same symbols mentioned in one of Hermione's notes from an earlier draft of the script. The Usins translated roughly to, "He who commands the serpent shall pass unseen." It was an echo of Salazar Slytherin's own words, hinting at the founder's mastery of both magic and secrecy. The note from Hermione played a crucial part in this early concept. While she was in the hospital wing, petrified and unable to move, the filmmakers had written a small insert scene showing a folded parchment tucked under her stiff hand. The note contained cryptic lines scribbled in haste before her attack. "Look to the snakes. They will lead you where no wizard's foot has trodden." It was a clue that bridged her intellect with Harry's instinct. In the final cut, this idea survived only in spirit through the pages she ripped from the book about basilisks, but the note itself would have added an emotional link between the trio even in her absence, a ghost of Hermione's voice guiding them when she could not speak. When Harry lifted his wand light over the sinks, the walls shimmered with hidden carvings that responded to the spell. Runes ignited one by one, forming the outline of a massive serpent coiling around the room. The light from Lumos Maxima cast long, trembling shadows, and the serpent's eyes glowed faintly green. In the center of the sink structure, one tap, marked with a small serpent engraving, was meant to hiss softly on its own, an auditory illusion designed by the filmmakers to suggest that the chamber itself was calling to Harry. This subtle detail was removed after test screenings found it too unsettling, yet it perfectly captured the spirit of the original design. There was also a powerful visual motif tied to Salazar Slytherin himself. Production sketches show that the runes around the sink were meant to depict Slytherin as both man and serpent, his body merging into scales as he descended into darkness. The original sequence emphasized the dual nature of the founder, a wizard consumed by his own bloodline obsession. Harry, gazing at these images, would have felt a strange pull, as though recognizing something familiar in the cold perfection of the carved face. The intention, according to early production notes, was to create a mirroring effect between Slytherin and Harry, both Parselmouths caught between fear and destiny. Before uttering the command in Parseltongue, Harry was supposed to hesitate. His wand light flickered as he looked back at Ron, uncertainty shadowing his expression. The air around them grew colder. The camera would have tightened on Harry's face as the whisper came. Low, instinctive, alien. The door's response was more elaborate in the first cut. Rather than simply parting, the stone serpents on its surface came to life, slithering around the circle, their scales grinding against each other as ancient dust fell like ash. The runes glowed with emerald light, illuminating the chamber in a swirl of dust and power. Only then did the massive entrance spiral open, revealing the black mouth of the tunnel. The descent itself was longer too. In the theatrical version, Ron and Harry simply slide down the stone chute into the chamber. But in the lost sequence, Harry's spell, Lumos Maxima, remained active, casting eerie shadows on the wet walls as they fell. The camera would have revealed images carved into the rock, a procession of snakes, a wizard holding a staff, and a woman with her eyes closed, symbolizing the basilisk's victims. These carvings were meant to foreshadow the petrified students and even hint at the chamber's ancient curse. The sound design included low, rhythmic hissing beneath the roar of rushing air, giving the impression that they were falling through the throat of a giant serpent. Number 16. Harry and Dobby in the Infirmary. The hospital wing at Hogwarts has always been a quiet sanctuary in the chaos of the castle, a place of whispered breaths and the faint clinking of potion bottles, where victories often end in pain and healing takes on more than one meaning. After the battle with the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets, the air in that room carried not only the smell of disinfecting draughts, but the exhaustion of triumph shadowed by something unspoken. In the theatrical version of the film, we see a brief moment between Harry Potter and Dobby the house elf, a scene that feels light-hearted after so much darkness. But what the audience did not see, and what was removed from the final cut, was a quiet and deeply emotional exchange that would have changed how we viewed Dobby's story from that point forward. In the deleted sequence, Harry sits upright in his hospital bed, still pale from the venom that had nearly killed him. Around him, sunlight spills through tall windows, and Madame Pomfrey moves like a ghost tending to the wounded. Dobby stands near the foot of Harry's bed, holding the sock that had just granted him his freedom, a small, pitiful thing, striped and slightly torn, yet in that moment it is more precious than gold. The camera, in the original script, lingers on Dobby's face as he realizes the enormity of what has happened. His hands tremble not from fear, but from the overwhelming weight of being free for the first time in his life. The deleted lines are simple, yet they hold the depth of prophecy. Dobby says that his master, meaning Harry, has not merely given him a sock, but a future. It is an expression loaded with gratitude, but also a kind of dawning understanding of destiny. In J.K. Rowling's universe, small gestures often hold enormous meaning. The sock, symbolizing freedom, becomes the seed of loyalty, and that loyalty would later bloom into sacrifice. Dobby's words that follow, spoken in a near whisper. Dobby knows that Potter must still face great evil, but Dobby will be there, are haunting when we know what awaits him years later on the beach at Shell Cottage, where he gives his life to save Harry and his friends. This moment, had it remained in the film, would have subtly bridged the early innocence of Chamber of Secrets with the tragic courage of Deathly Hallows. It would have reminded viewers that even the most unlikely creatures in Rowling's world carry threads of fate woven tightly into Harry's journey. In the book, Rowling often uses small prophetic touches that go unnoticed at first. When Dobby says earlier in the novel, Dobby only wants Harry Potter safe, the phrase feels almost comic, an overzealous devotion from a frightened elf. Yet the deleted hospital scene would have turned that devotion into something almost sacred, a vow spoken in candlelight long before the final war began. There is something profoundly human in Dobby's gratitude. Though he is a magical being, his understanding of freedom is painfully familiar. He has known nothing but servitude, punishment, and fear, and suddenly he holds autonomy in his small hands. The filmmakers may have feared that giving him this prophetic awareness too early would make the later story predictable, but in truth it would have deepened his character far beyond the bounds of comic relief. Dobby's death in Deathly Hallows is one of the few moments in the series where even readers who never shed tears before found themselves breaking. The house elf who once bumbled into Harry's life, breaking lamps and spoiling puddings, dies whispering, "Such a beautiful place to be with friends." The missing scene in the hospital wing would have made that moment echo louder in the heart. Harry's own expression during the cut sequence is also significant. In the notes from the scene's draft, he is said to watch Dobby with quiet confusion, not yet understanding why the elf's words feel so heavy. He has faced Voldemort twice already by then, and though he knows fear, he does not yet grasp the scale of the darkness surrounding his world. The idea that someone else might already sense it and promise to stand beside him adds a layer of destiny to the bond between boy and elf. It is as though Dobby, freed from his chains, can suddenly see further ahead than anyone else. From a storytelling perspective, the removal of that scene alters the rhythm of Chamber of Secrets. The film ends on a cheerful, almost comedic note, with the restored students and laughter filling the hall. It is a classic Hollywood closure, a moment of triumph after peril. Yet Rowling's world, even in its lighter books, is never far from tragedy. The deleted dialogue would have left the audience uneasy, a subtle hint that Harry's path was far from over, that the shadows would soon return. Such foreshadowing, gentle yet chilling, is what binds the earlier films to the darker tone of the later ones. Thematically, Dobby's statement about the future embodies one of Rowling's central messages, that freedom comes with responsibility. When Dobby gains his liberty, he does not retreat from the world. Instead, he chooses to use his freedom in service to what is right. Harry Potter set Dobby free, he says in the books, and Dobby is a free elf. Those words are both declaration and promise. The lost hospital scene would have shown that even in the moment of joy, Dobby already sees the weight of his freedom, the choice to stand beside Harry in the battles ahead. Number 17, The Last Feast at Hogwarts. The scene that never made it to the final cut of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets was meant to be more than just an ending. It was meant to be a quiet reflection on everything that had happened within the walls of Hogwarts. After the chaos of the basilisk, the petrified students, and the looming shadow of Tom Riddle's diary, the castle was once again alive with laughter. But behind the restored cheer there lingered the silence of those who had faced fear and survived. The deleted scene, known among fans as The Last Supper at Hogwarts, captured that fragile balance between relief and remembrance, a balance that the theatrical version smoothed over in favor of simplicity. The setting was the Great Hall, bathed in the golden light of hundreds of floating candles. The long tables were restored to their rightful order after months of uncertainty and whispers. On the walls, the banners of the four houses fluttered gently, as though sighing with the same collective breath of peace. It was the final evening feast before the students returned home for the summer. The food, as always, appeared magically: roast chicken, treacle tart, and steaming jugs of pumpkin juice. But there was a stillness among the students that hadn't been there before. They knew that something had changed within them. The victory was real, but it had come at a cost: the loss of innocence. In this lost moment, Professor McGonagall rose from the staff table, her stern face softened by something almost maternal. The script described her lifting her glass of pumpkin juice and speaking words that were quiet but carried through the hall. To those who fought the darkness and won without ever knowing how. The line, simple as it was, cut through the light chatter and stilled every sound in the room. It wasn't just about Harry, though all eyes instinctively turned to him. It was about the courage that had spread through Hogwarts like a spark, the students who refused to give in to fear, the teachers who kept the castle running, the ghosts who watched in silence as the living struggled through shadows. As the camera panned down the Gryffindor table, the tone was meant to shift from triumph to contemplation. Harry sat between Ron and Hermione, his posture relaxed, but his expression heavy with thought. In that moment he wasn't the boy who lived, nor the slayer of a basilisk. He was a boy who had faced something older and darker than he could fully understand. Across from him, Ginny Weasley smiled faintly, her eyes distant. The trauma of possession still clung to her like a fading bruise. Fred and George exchanged a glance that was uncharacteristically solemn, their usual mischief dimmed by the weight of what their sister had endured. Even Percy, so often lost in his own ambitions, seemed quieter, humbled by the events that had shaken his family. At the edge of the frame, Argus Filch was seated near the back, awkward and out of place among the revelry. For once, there was no bitterness in his expression. His cat, Mrs. Norris, had been restored from her petrification, and he looked at her with the tenderness of a man who had been given a second chance. He clapped softly, almost shyly, his wrinkled hands barely making a sound. It was a rare moment of humanity for a character often played for disdain. The scriptwriters had intended it as a symbolic note, that even those on the margins of the magical world shared in the quiet gratitude that filled the hall. Behind the camera's sweep lay a deeper intention. This was to be the bridge between the Chamber of Secrets and the darker tone that would follow in The Prisoner of Azkaban. It was a farewell to childhood's simplicity, a nod to the growing understanding that evil was not always vanquished, only subdued for a time. In that soft candlelight, Hogwarts was not just a school, it was a sanctuary rebuilt after a storm. Every laugh, every cheer carried a hidden echo of relief. It was the kind of bittersweet calm that only comes after one has looked directly into the abyss and found a way back. In the novel, J.K. Rowling captured this same emotional undercurrent with lines like, "It was hard to believe there had ever been a time when the castle had felt so dark and cold." That sentiment would have translated beautifully to film had the deleted scene been preserved. Instead of closing on the loud, jubilant applause of Gryffindor's triumph, the director's version would have lingered on the stillness that follows victory, the kind that reminds one of what was risked to win it. Harry's eyes in that scene were described as bright with reflection, not triumph. It was a crucial difference, one that revealed the boy's growing awareness that heroism was not without cost. The atmosphere of gratitude threaded through the scene like invisible music. Dumbledore's place at the head of the table symbolized restoration, the return of wisdom after chaos. Though he said nothing in the cut version, his gentle smile carried 1,000 words. He looked not at Harry but at the students as a whole, as though silently acknowledging each of their battles, large and small. The camera would then have caught Snape, his face unreadable, eyes flickering for a moment toward the boy he had once scorned. The script noted this fleeting glance as a trace of something human, perhaps respect, perhaps regret. It was subtle, but it spoke volumes about the complex web of emotions that defined the staff's relationship to Harry's destiny. Number 18. Letter to Ron. The scene that never made it to the final cut of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets offers one of those rare glimpses into the quiet loneliness of Harry Potter's life at Privet Drive. It unfolds in the small, cramped bedroom on the upper floor of number 4, where the only light comes from the street lamps outside and the pale gleam of the moon. The house is asleep, the Dursleys satisfied after another day of reminding Harry how unwelcome he is. The boy sits by the window with a piece of parchment spread before him and a quill trembling in his hand. He writes to Ron Weasley, the only person he believes might understand. The words come slowly, clumsy and hesitant, but filled with a desperate need to be heard, to tell someone that something strange has happened, that a house elf named Dobby has appeared out of nowhere, warning him not to return to Hogwarts. There is a deep human ache in the moment, the feeling of being cut off from the only world that ever felt like home. The first book had ended with Harry promising himself that he was going home for the holidays, knowing that Hogwarts was waiting for him in September. Now, in this forgotten scene, that promise has turned hollow. The boy who defeated Voldemort is trapped again in the same cage, this time without even the faint comfort of knowing what awaits him. He leans over the parchment, struggling to form the right words, knowing that he can't. Tell Ron everything. The Ministry of Magic doesn't believe in Dobby's warnings, and the Dursleys certainly wouldn't care, but Ron would. Ron with his easy grin and loyalty that seems endless. Harry's letter is simple, awkward, and almost painfully sincere. He writes about missing the burrow, the smell of Mrs. Weasley's cooking, the laughter of Fred and George, the sound of the ghoul clanking in the attic. He doesn't mention Dobby by name, only saying that something strange happened and that he's worried it might keep him from coming back to school. He asks, almost shyly, if Ron has heard anything strange himself. He ends with a line that strikes with quiet sadness. "I hope to see you soon. I don't know what I'll do if I can't." It's a child's cry disguised as a friendly note. Then comes the small but powerful detail that gives the scene its heart. Harry ties the letter to Hedwig's leg. She blinks at him with those intelligent amber eyes, full of something that looks like reproach. She hoots softly, shifting her talons, refusing to extend her leg toward him. It is not the defiance of a pet, it's the reaction of a creature who senses her master's despair. Harry whispers to her, trying to convince her to take the letter. She stays still. The moment stretches, the silence of the house growing heavier. Then Harry pleads quietly, "Please, not like last time, Hedwig. He's my friend." It is one of the rare lines in the film that would have bridged the emotional gap between the Philosopher's Stone and the Chamber of Secrets. In the first story, friendship is new and magical, something that rescues Harry from isolation. In this lost moment, we see that friendship has become a lifeline, the one thread keeping him from falling back into the suffocating emptiness of life with the Dursleys. The act of writing to Ron isn't just about sharing news, it's about holding on to that connection. When Hedwig finally takes flight, disappearing into the purple night sky, Harry watches her go with an expression that mixes relief and longing. He murmurs to himself, "If only I could explain to someone what's happening." The unspoken pain behind that thought transforms the tone of the entire early sequence. In the finished film, the arrival of the flying Ford Anglia feels almost comedic, a daring rescue pulled straight from a fairy tale. But with this missing scene, the rescue would have carried the weight of an emotional answer. Ron and his brothers wouldn't simply be saving Harry from a locked room, they would be responding to a silent cry for help. It changes the rhythm of the story, turning what could be slapstick into something tender and deeply human. There's a thematic continuity hidden here, one that J.K. Rowling often wove into her writing, the idea that friendship can be an act of salvation. The letter scene, though never filmed, mirrors the sentiment expressed later when Dumbledore tells Harry in the Chamber of Secrets, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Harry's choice here is small but significant. He chooses to reach out rather than withdraw. He writes, he hopes, and he believes that Ron will understand. In that belief lies the foundation of his strength. Cinematically, the scene would also have given weight to Hedwig's role as more than a pet. In the Philosopher's Stone, she is a symbol of freedom, a gift from Hagrid that represents Harry's new life. In this deleted moment, she becomes a mirror of his emotional world. Her initial refusal to fly captures his own paralysis, his fear of hope. Her eventual departure, gliding away into the clouds, symbolizes his fragile faith that someone will come for him. It's a quiet metaphor, one that would have made the ensuing rescue resonate on a far deeper level. The tone of the letter itself, with its awkward sincerity and incomplete confessions, also hints at the complexity of Harry's emotions. He doesn't want to burden Ron with his fears, yet he cannot contain them. That tension between independence and the longing for support defines much of his character throughout the series. It's the same tension that surfaces in The Goblet of Fire when he faces the Triwizard Tournament alone, and again in the Order of the Phoenix when isolation nearly breaks him. This lost scene could have served as the first shadow of that recurring theme, Harry's silent struggle between needing help and being afraid to ask for it. It also deepens the Dursleys' cruelty without requiring their presence on screen. The fact that Harry must write in secret in the dead of night speaks volumes. The boy who once stood on platform 9 3/4 surrounded by friends is now a prisoner again, whispering to a bird. The smallest noises in the house, Vernon snores, the creak of a floorboard, carry a sense of danger. When Hedwig flies away, she risks being heard, and that adds an undertone of tension that enriches the moment. The loneliness isn't just emotional, it's physical, oppressive, tangible. From a narrative perspective, this scene would have created a smoother emotional transition between the two films. The Philosopher's Stone ends on optimism, Harry boarding the Hogwarts Express, smiling as he says, "I'm not going home, not really." The Chamber of Secrets begins on despair. The letter scene explains the gap between those two feelings. It gives context to his isolation, making the flying car scene not an abrupt shift, but a continuation of a story about friendship's endurance. The rescue becomes the answer to his unspoken prayer, the moment when the world reminds him that he is not forgotten. The words Harry writes to Ron also echo another famous sentiment from the books. There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other. The bond forged in danger becomes unbreakable, and this unwritten letter becomes the invisible thread connecting them. The beauty of it lies in its simplicity. No magic, no monsters, just a boy writing to his friend in the dark. The power of that small act lies in how it transforms loneliness into connection, despair into a quiet kind of courage. Emotionally, the missing scene would have deepened the impact of the Burrows sequence that follows. When Harry arrives at the Weasleys' home and is greeted with warmth and chaos, the audience would feel the full relief of that contrast. The joy of seeing Mrs. Weasley fuss over him, the smell of breakfast in the kitchen, the laughter of the twins. All of it would hit harder if we had first seen the emptiness of Privet Drive. The letter scene provides the emotional before to that radiant after. It is also a moment that subtly develops Ron's character, even without his presence. By writing to him, Harry acknowledges Ron as the one person he trusts above all others. The choice of recipient matters. He doesn't write to Hermione, whose intellect might analyze the problem, nor to Hagrid, who might overreact. He writes to Ron because Ron represents loyalty without condition. The faith Harry places in him foreshadows their future, the years of shared danger and the occasional rifts that only prove the depth of their bond. Finally, this unseen moment captures what makes the Harry Potter series endure beyond its magic. It's not the spells or the creatures, but the quiet, very human truths hidden between them. The loneliness of childhood, the need for understanding, the fragile beauty of friendship. In the flicker of candlelight on Privet Drive, as a boy whispers to his owl and sends a letter into the night, we see everything that defines him: courage, hope, and the stubborn belief that someone, somewhere, will answer. Number 19, Staff Council. In the depths of Hogwarts, just after the second attack, there existed a scene that never reached the silver screen, a moment that could have changed the entire emotional tone of the Chamber of Secrets. It was called the Council of Teachers, and it was meant to unfold in Dumbledore's office under the dim golden glow of candlelight. The scene would have shown the four most influential professors of the school, Dumbledore, McGonagall, Snape, and Sprout, gathered around a long oak table. It wasn't a meeting of strategists, but of frightened, exhausted guardians of children. The camera would move slowly across their faces, revealing the tension that filled the ancient room. In this version, Hogwarts didn't seem just a magical fortress. It felt like a living organism wounded from within. The concept of the scene was to explore the internal fracture that fear creates. After Colin Creevey had been found petrified, Dumbledore's calm facade was meant to waver for the first time. Richard Harris, who portrayed him, would have spoken in a voice quiet but trembling, filled with regret rather than certainty. It was not about the monster in the pipes or the legend of the chamber. It was about what fear does to people who are supposed to protect others. The professors, long seen by students as unshakable symbols of power, were to appear human, divided, uncertain, and frightened. Severus Snape, the one who always hid behind sarcasm and bitterness, was written to speak first. His voice, as the screenplay described, would cut through the silence like a thin blade. He was to argue that the school should be closed immediately, not out of care for the children, but out of his pragmatic understanding that panic would destroy Hogwarts faster than any monster. Snape's words would reveal his loyalty to order above sentiment, the need to preserve structure even if it meant admitting defeat. He was not cruel in that moment. He was desperate to prevent chaos. Opposite him, Minerva McGonagall would have risen, her green robes rustling softly. The actress Maggie Smith was meant to embody not authority, but moral outrage. She would remind the others that Hogwarts was not just a place of learning, it was home to hundreds of young souls who looked up to them. "If we send them away now," she was meant to say in the script, "we tell them that fear has already won." Her line echoed Dumbledore's philosophy from the books, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. It would mirror his earlier words to Harry. "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Pomona Sprout, the gentle head of Hufflepuff, would have spoken next. Her character rarely had moments of gravity in the films, but in this deleted sequence, she was the emotional center. Her concern wasn't politics or control, it was the children themselves. The scene would show her clutching her hands, soil still under her nails from tending to mandrakes, the very plants being grown to cure the petrified victims. She would speak of their screams and their purpose, reminding the others that hope was literally growing in the greenhouses. Her presence was to symbolize quiet perseverance, that healing, even if slow, was still happening. Phileas Flitwick, the tiny charms professor, would add a note of reason, representing the intellectual voice among emotion. He would remind them that the chamber was not a myth, but a historical construct. His lines would include a direct reference to Hogwarts, a history, anchoring the scene in the school's legacy of repeating hidden truths. Flitwick's calmness would serve as contrast. Where Snape sought control and McGonagall sought justice, he sought understanding. Each professor embodied a fragment of Hogwarts itself: logic, compassion, duty, and faith. As the argument grew, Dumbledore would remain silent for most of it, his eyes moving from one professor to another. The screenplay described his demeanor as ancient sorrow. He was not there to lead, but to listen. His silence spoke louder than any spell. It was the stillness before a storm. Finally, when the voices subsided, he would speak, and the tone of the entire film would have shifted. He would look down the long table where the candle flames flickered and deliver the line that fans later rediscovered in the early drafts of the script. "Sometimes evil does not come from without. It grows from fear that has taken root in hearts." That one sentence carried a kind of quiet prophecy. It was not just about the chamber or the monster that lurked in it. It was about Tom Riddle himself, the boy who once feared insignificance so deeply that he became Voldemort. The line would have reflected the essence of Dumbledore's understanding of evil. that it begins not with hatred, but with fear. Fear of weakness, fear of rejection, fear of being powerless. In that moment, Dumbledore would not be a distant, wise figure, but a man who had seen too many young souls corrupted by that very emotion. This deleted scene was intended to serve as a bridge between the mystery of the chamber and the moral weight of the story. Without it, the movie leans more on action and suspense. But within that lost conversation was the heartbeat of Rowling's theme, that courage and compassion are forged in the midst of uncertainty. The Council of Teachers would have shown the adults of Hogwarts not as invincible, but as mirrors of the fears haunting their students. It was to make the school itself feel alive, breathing through those who served it. Cinematically, it was designed to be visually striking. The room would be lined with portraits of former headmasters, all watching in silence, ancestors who had once faced crises of their own. The camera would linger on their eyes, suggesting that history was repeating itself. Outside the tall windows, lightning would flash over the forbidden forest, echoing the inner turmoil. The sound of the storm was meant to swell as Dumbledore delivered his line about fear. The entire sequence would have lasted no more than 3 minutes, but its emotional weight could have changed how viewers saw the rest of the film. From a storytelling standpoint, the removal of the scene stripped away a layer of moral complexity. In the books, Dumbledore constantly teaches that fear is the real enemy. He warns Harry in the Philosopher's Stone that the truth is a beautiful and terrible thing, and should therefore be treated with great caution. In the Chamber of Secrets, this scene would have echoed that lesson, revealing that the real danger to Hogwarts was not the basilisk, but the panic spreading among its people. By cutting it, the film lost an opportunity to deepen Dumbledore's role as both philosopher and protector. Imagine how differently the audience would perceive Snape if they had seen this conversation. His insistence on closing the school could have been read not as callousness, but foresight. His understanding of fear's power over young minds would have humanized him earlier, long before the later revelations of his loyalty. Likewise, McGonagall's defiance would have set the tone for her future leadership, her ability to act decisively even when the world seemed to crumble around her. There was also an intended layer of symbolism. The professors around that table represented the 4 founders of Hogwarts: Gryffindor's courage in McGonagall, Slytherin's cunning in Snape, Hufflepuff's loyalty in Sprout, and Ravenclaw's wisdom in Flitwick. Dumbledore sat at the head as the embodiment of unity, the balance between them all. The writers wanted the audience to feel that even centuries later, the founders' legacies still pulsed through their successors. Their disagreement wasn't a flaw. It was proof that diversity of thought was Hogwarts' true strength. Had this moment been included, the following scenes, Harry finding Tom Riddle's diary, Hermione's petrification, and the eventual descent into the chamber, would have gained deeper resonance. The viewers would carry with them Dumbledore's haunting warning about fear. Each new act of violence would echo that prophecy. The idea that evil thrives when people let terror dictate their actions. In the absence of the council scene, that philosophical thread is left for readers of the books to sense, but it remains invisible to casual film audiences. Even the pacing of the story would have benefited. Right before the chaos intensifies, a quiet, reflective moment would have provided contrast. A breath before the plunge. It would have grounded the audience emotionally, reminding them that Hogwarts isn't just a battleground of spells, but a community bound by fragile hope. That is what makes Rowling's world endure. Beneath the magic lies humanity. The lost scene of the Teachers' Council was not about monsters. It was about people, about how even the wise and powerful tremble when faced with the unknown. To imagine that candlelit meeting is to glimpse a version of the Chamber of Secrets that leans closer to tragedy than adventure. A version where Dumbledore's words linger long after the credits roll, whispering the truth he always believed, that fear, left unchecked, can turn even the purest heart toward darkness. It was a line not meant only for the story but for the audience, a reminder that sometimes the chambers we should fear most are the ones within ourselves. Number 20, Polyjuice Potion, Comic Beat. When Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets was first brought to life on screen in 2002, under the direction of Chris Columbus, the filmmakers faced the challenge of balancing the darker undertones of J.K. Rowling's second novel with the sense of wonder and humor that had defined the first film. Among the many sequences that underwent modification in the final edit, one particular scene stands out for both its creativity and its loss: the extended Polyjuice Potion episode in which Hermione Granger, played by Emma Watson, accidentally transforms into a cat. What was originally envisioned as a comical continuation of this transformation never made it to theatres, trimmed away for tonal reasons. Yet fragments of it survived, offering a glimpse into what could have been one of the funniest and most human moments in the series. The Polyjuice scene, as fans know, is one of the most memorable from both the book and the film. Deep beneath the polished floors of Hogwarts, in the shadowy girl's lavatory haunted by moaning Myrtle, Hermione brews one of the most complex potions in magical literature. J.K. Rowling described the moment vividly. The potion hissed and bubbled, filling the room with a powerful smell of burnt rubber. The task had taken weeks and the stakes were high. Harry and Ron, posing as Slytherins, hoped to interrogate Draco Malfoy and uncover whether he was the heir of Slytherin. But Hermione's accident, using a cat hair from Millicent Bulstrode's robe, was both a turning point and a rare flash of slapstick in an otherwise tense chapter. In the original film script, however, this incident did not end with Hermione retreating in embarrassment to the hospital wing. The sequence continued for nearly a minute longer, turning the shock of her transformation into an awkward, hilarious exchange among the trio. After Hermione emerged from the stall, half human and half feline, with fur-covered cheeks, elongated pupils, and twitching ears, Ron, played by Rupert Grint, was scripted to deliver a teasing remark that perfectly captured his adolescent awkwardness. "Well," he was supposed to mutter, "at least the tail suits you." It was a line that would have allowed Grint's dry, comedic timing to shine, balancing the discomfort of the moment with the humour that defined Ron's character throughout the series. The response from Harry, played by Daniel Radcliffe, was written to break the tension entirely. Instead of standing in stunned silence, he was meant to burst into uncontrollable laughter. The stage directions reportedly described Harry's laughter echoing through the bathroom, bouncing off the cold tiles, and making even Myrtle's ghostly giggle join in. Hermione, deeply offended and humiliated, would have reacted not with her usual sharp words, but with an instinctive feline sound, a loud, indignant meow. In a moment of comic frustration, she was to grab a pillow from one of Myrtle's old bathroom stalls and throw it straight at Harry, who ducked as feathers scattered across the set. It was a rare instance of physical comedy that would have shown a lighter side of their friendship, revealing that beneath the danger and mystery, these were still children, awkward, impulsive, and human. The scene was fully filmed during principal photography at Leavesden Studios. Emma Watson later recalled in an interview that this was one of the most uncomfortable days on set. The feline prosthetics required hours of application, with a combination of animatronic ears and practical makeup effects by Nick Dudman's creature department. Watson reportedly had to wear contact lenses that distorted her vision, as well as a furry bodysuit for the half-transformed appearance. Despite the discomfort, the mood on set was cheerful. Columbus encouraged the trio to improvise reactions, allowing Radcliffe and Grint to experiment with comedic timing. The laughter, both scripted and spontaneous, reportedly caused multiple takes to be ruined as the young actors couldn't contain themselves. In the editing room, however, Columbus made the difficult decision to cut the humorous ending. His reasoning was rooted in tone. The Chamber of Secrets had begun to introduce darker elements: the petrifications, the whispering voice in the walls, the hidden monster lurking beneath Hogwarts. Immediately following the Polyjuice scene, the plot would move into the discovery of more victims and the growing fear that Hogwarts might close. Columbus feared that inserting a moment of laughter, however genuine, would undermine the tension the film had carefully built. As he once noted in commentary sessions, the goal was to preserve the sense of escalating dread. The humor, though charming, risked making light of a sequence meant to highlight the dangers of meddling with advanced magic. Still, traces of the cut footage survive. In the DVD extras released in 2003, viewers can catch a glimpse of Emma Watson's feline Hermione turning toward the camera, while in the background, Daniel Radcliffe can be seen grinning uncontrollably. The pillow-throwing moment, though partially visible in behind-the-scenes footage, never appeared in the film's deleted scenes section, likely because it was never fully scored or color-corrected. Fans who have seen production stills describe the sequence as a rare window into the actors' natural chemistry, a moment of youthful playfulness amid the gothic shadows of the Chamber of Secrets storyline. Had the scene remained, it might have subtly shifted how audiences perceived Hermione's transformation. In the film's final cut, the moment serves mainly as a plot device, a warning about the perils of magical overconfidence. Hermione's condition is treated with seriousness, and her absence from the next scenes underlines the gravity of their situation. The lost comic beat, on the other hand, would have highlighted something different: the resilience of friendship and humor even in dark times. The joke about the tail suiting her would not have been mere mockery. It would have reflected Ron's awkward affection, a pattern that would continue to develop throughout the series, culminating in their eventual relationship. The laughter that followed could have shown Harry's relief after weeks of fear and tension, a momentary escape from the weight of destiny pressing on his young shoulders. The humor also would have paid homage to Rowling's own style. Her books are filled with tonal contrasts where moments of comedy exist alongside peril. Even in the Chamber of Secrets, the author juxtaposed terror with levity. Gilderoy Lockhart's vanity, the Weasley twins' mischievous antics, or Ron's terrified scream of "follow the spiders" right before facing the monstrous Aragog. These scenes remind readers that courage often exists hand in hand with laughter. The cut bathroom exchange would have carried that same spirit into the film adaptation, preserving the balance that made Rowling's world feel so authentic and alive. Interestingly, the choice to remove humor from this moment also foreshadowed the tonal direction the series would take. After the Chamber of Secrets, the franchise began to grow steadily darker. The Prisoner of Azkaban under Alfonso Cuarón introduced a more atmospheric psychological approach, while The Goblet of Fire marked the beginning of irreversible loss. By omitting this comedic detour, Columbus may have unintentionally paved the way for that transition, smoothing the tonal shift from childhood adventure to adolescent peril. What was lost in laughter was perhaps gained in continuity of mood. Yet fans who learned about the deleted sequence often lament its absence. The image of Hermione, half cat and furious, pelting a laughing Harry with a pillow is both absurd and endearing. It captures a moment of innocence, Three friends who, despite facing danger beyond their years, still behave like ordinary teenagers. It would have reminded viewers of what was at stake in their journey, not only survival, but the preservation of youth itself. As the series progressed and the trio's lives darkened, such moments of humor became increasingly rare, replaced by loss, sacrifice, and war. In retrospect, the Polyjuice comedy scene stands as a fascinating example of how editorial decisions shape tone and memory. What audiences remember most about the Chamber of Secrets are its darker images, the blood-red warning on the wall, the petrified students, the eerie echo of Parseltongue. The lost laughter of that bathroom, however, lingers in the margins of the script, like a ghost of the light-heartedness that once defined the wizarding world. One can imagine the scene playing out, Hermione's indignant meow, Harry's laughter echoing, Ron's smirk fading into guilt. It's an image of friendship, imperfection, and youth. All the qualities that made Harry Potter more than just a fantasy, but a mirror of growing up. In the end, perhaps Chris Columbus was right to remove it. The film's pacing benefits from the cut. The threat of the chamber feels more immediate without a detour into humor. But what remains undeniable is that the lost moment reveals something precious about the filmmaking process. Behind every frame of Harry Potter, there were choices: what to reveal, what to hide, what tone to strike. The laughter that never reached audiences reminds us that even in the most magical world, storytelling depends on restraint. Yet for those who have seen the stills, heard the whispers, or read the early drafts, the image of Hermione's feline scowl and Harry's helpless laughter will always exist, an unseen memory of a lighter Hogwarts, frozen just before the shadows began to fall. Number 21, Conversation with Aragog, extended. Deep in the darkness of the Forbidden Forest, the torchlight quivered in Harry's trembling hand. The trees seemed alive, whispering secrets that had been buried for 50 years. In the movie version of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, this scene, the encounter with Aragog, is short and chilling. Yet early drafts of the script once contained a much longer, more haunting version. In this cut material, Aragog did not simply speak of Hagrid's innocence. He spoke in riddles that stretched far beyond what Harry or Ron could comprehend. These lost words hinted at an ancient connection between Tom Riddle and the monster lurking beneath Hogwarts, an echo of evil that ran deeper than anyone had dared to imagine. The extended scene began after the spiders had encircled the boys, their clicking legs forming a cage of black and silver. The air was damp and thick with the scent of decay. Aragog, vast and blind, emerged from the shadows, his voice heavy as the forest itself. In this version, he was not merely a creature defending his children. He was an old being, wise in his own monstrous way, and burdened by the memories of a friendship long lost. He recalled Hagrid's kindness, the days when he was but an egg in a box, hidden from the prying eyes of fearful wizards. But then, as the boys listened in terror, the spider's tale took a darker turn. He spoke of the one who came before, a boy who had once wandered into the forest many decades ago. "A clever boy," Aragog rasped, "with questions about what lies below." This line, included in an early draft, would have connected directly to Tom Marvolo Riddle. The spider remembered his scent, his voice, the way he had asked about the creature Hagrid had been accused of keeping. "He spoke of purging the school," Aragog said, and his words carried the taste of command. It was as if Riddle's presence had once brushed against the spider's domain, leaving behind a trace of something foul, something serpentine. The missing dialogue continued as Aragog described the terror that spread through the castle when the Chamber of Secrets was first opened. Students whispered of a monster, but few understood the truth. "The beast was not merely born of magic," Aragog said in the deleted version. "It was born of intent." He told Harry that the creature's obedience was not of fear, but of kinship. "It listened," Aragog murmured, "because it recognized the soul of its master." This phrasing would have given audiences a subtle but unmistakable clue. Riddle and the basilisk were bound not only by magic, but by something far older, perhaps the dark inheritance of Salazar Slytherin himself. In this extended cut, the camera was meant to linger on Harry's face as he struggled to understand the spider's cryptic words. He would later recall them when he stood before the basilisk in the chamber itself, realizing too late what Aragog had truly meant. The lost line, "He who commands it does not fear its gaze, for that gaze is his own," was perhaps the most chilling of all. It implied that Riddle, through his connection with the basilisk, saw the world through its deadly eyes. The serpent stare was, symbolically, his reflection. It was a poetic suggestion that Riddle's soul was already fragmented, that the boy who would become Voldemort was beginning to split himself in ways even he did not yet understand. The removal of this line was not a small decision. Steve Kloves, who adapted the screenplay, feared that it would reveal too much too soon. If Aragog hinted that Riddle and the monster were one in essence, the audience might guess that Riddle was still alive in some form. Chris Columbus, the director, reportedly loved the eerie tone of the extended scene, but agreed that it risked undermining the suspense of the final act. In the finished film, Aragog's speech was trimmed to a few sentences about Hagrid's innocence and the creature that lived in the chamber. The subtle mythology beneath the story was left in shadow. Still, traces of this original intent remain in Rowling's text. In the book, Aragog says, "We do not speak of it, we do not name it, we do not dwell on it." His terror of the creature below Hogwarts is palpable, yet in the longer script his fear was tinged with understanding, as if he had glimpsed the monster's true nature and found in it something horrifyingly human. The basilisk was not simply a weapon, it was a mirror of its master's soul, a living symbol of Slytherin's belief in purity and dominion. Aragog, blind and ancient, could not see, but he knew. He knew that evil had not died with the boy who once came to question him. There was also an additional moment of silence in the deleted version, an unsettling pause where the forest itself seemed to listen. Harry asked why Aragog feared the creature if it too was born of magic. The spider's answer was cut entirely, because some magics hunger, young wizard, and hunger knows no master. That single line would have painted a deeper mythology around the Chamber of Secrets, suggesting that the monster's creation was bound to something darker than mere wizardry, a kind of curse that consumed even those who believed they could control it. For a children's film, such imagery was perhaps too grim, but in spirit it matched the series' gradual descent into darkness. The longer scene also explored the relationship between Hagrid and Aragog with greater tenderness. Aragog recalled how Hagrid had fed him, protected him, and risked punishment to keep him alive. "He was not afraid," the spider said softly. "He saw in me a creature, not a curse." This moment would have deepened the audience's emotional connection to Hagrid and contrasted sharply with the fear Harry and Ron felt. The boy's torchlight illuminated not just the monstrous but the misunderstood, a theme central to Rowling's world. Yet, as Aragog continued, that warmth turned to dread. His voice lowered to a hiss as he warned them to beware those who speak with the tongue of serpents. It was both a warning and a prophecy, pointing to Harry's own Parseltongue abilities and his hidden link to Voldemort. From a storytelling perspective, the lost dialogue served as a hinge between innocence and revelation. It foreshadowed the duality within Harry himself, the boy who shared a fragment of Voldemort's power without understanding its cost. Aragog's final words in the extended version were meant to echo in Harry's dreams. When two souls share a tongue, they share more than words. This line would have given early viewers a reason to question Harry's connection to the dark forces surrounding him. It blurred the boundary between hero and villain, a theme that became central in the later books. The tone of the scene, according to early production notes, was gothic and suffocating. Rain dripped through the leaves, and every sound of the forest seemed amplified, the skitter of legs, the rustle of wings. The camera was meant to linger on Aragog's blind eyes, milky and motionless, reflecting Harry's torchlight like two moons. The silence before his riddle about the gaze that is his own was long enough for viewers to hold their breath. It was a moment of revelation disguised as mystery, a classic example of how the Harry Potter films once aimed to balance childlike wonder with primal fear. If this expanded sequence had remained, it might have subtly altered how audiences viewed Tom Riddle's diary later in the film. The diary would no longer feel like an ordinary cursed object. It would appear as a living piece of Riddle's consciousness, consistent with Aragog's claim that the master and the monster share one soul. The connection between Riddle and the basilisk would seem less like command and more like communion, each reflecting the other's will. When Harry eventually stabbed the diary with the basilisk fang, it would carry an even deeper symbolism, the serpent's own weapon destroying the reflection of its master. The film's climactic act would have resonated as poetic justice rather than mere triumph. Interestingly, this idea of the gaze being shared between master and creature prefigures later revelations in the series. The Horcruxes, as readers would later learn, bind fragments of a soul to physical objects. Aragog's mysterious words could have been an early echo of this concept, hinting that Riddle had already begun experimenting with soul-splitting magic even as a student. His ability to not fear the creature's gaze would thus take on literal meaning. His soul and the basilisk's essence were intertwined, two reflections of the same dark power. The deleted line, while too revealing for a second installment, would have aligned beautifully with the series' long-term mythology. In retrospect, one can understand why the filmmakers trimmed the encounter. The Chamber of Secrets was only the second film in the franchise, and its tone still leaned toward youthful adventure rather than metaphysical dread. The producers wanted suspense, not existential horror, but fans who have read the early drafts and novelizations often describe the extended scene as one of the greatest what-ifs in the series, a moment when myth could have deepened mystery. Aragog's speech would have elevated him from a side creature to a kind of dark prophet, echoing the role of Fawkes the Phoenix on the side of light. Even without the lost dialogue, the meeting in the forest remains one of the most atmospheric moments in the saga. It marks Harry's first direct confrontation with a creature tied to the school's hidden history. Yet imagining this longer version allows us to see the story through a richer lens. It transforms a terrifying encounter into a revelation about power, language, and identity. It reminds us that even monsters may hold fragments of truth, and that sometimes the lines removed from a script can whisper the loudest truths of all. Number 22, Tom Riddle's Memory, Second Attempt. Hidden power of Tom Riddle's diary was far darker than the film allowed audiences to see. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the movie presented a mysterious artifact capable of showing a memory, a young Tom Riddle framed in the sepia tones of the past, revealing Hagrid's supposed guilt. Yet the truth behind the diary extended far beyond that single vision. In the early drafts of the script, there was a second encounter, a moment that exposed how deeply the diary could reach into Harry's mind. It was a scene that existed between curiosity and danger, where Tom's charm shifted into something almost hypnotic. The scene was filmed but later cut, leaving behind only hints of its existence in production notes and editor recollections. The first time Harry wrote in the diary, the ink sank into the page as if absorbed by the paper's own will. "My name is Harry Potter," he wrote, and the words vanished. Then, to his astonishment, a reply appeared. "Hello, Harry Potter. My name is Tom Riddle." It was the beginning of a dialogue between two minds, one alive, one preserved. But in the deleted version, the second encounter showed how fragile that boundary could become. The diary was no longer content to show echoes of memory. It wanted to speak directly to him, to manipulate his trust. The phrase that appeared this time was chilling in its simplicity. "You trust them, Harry, but they do not trust you." The words were not random. They cut directly into Harry's growing isolation at Hogwarts. He had heard whispers calling him the heir of Slytherin. Even Ron and Hermione, despite their loyalty, had moments of fear they tried to hide. The diary sensed this weakness. It exploited the seed of doubt that already existed within him. Tom Riddle's preserved consciousness began to weave a trap of empathy and suspicion, presenting himself as the only one who truly understood Harry's loneliness. It was a psychological mirror of what Voldemort himself would later do, planting fear, then offering comfort that led to control. The cutscene unfolded in the stillness of the Gryffindor dormitory. Candlelight flickered on Harry's desk as he opened the diary once more, its pages blank but somehow alive. When the words appeared, the handwriting was more confident, more assertive than before. Then came a shadow, not as a memory but as a figure that seemed to breathe through the ink. Tom Riddle stepped forward from the diary's pages, not as a ghost, but as something half-formed, eyes gleaming with intelligence. He was not yet the spectre Harry would later meet in the chamber itself, but he was close, too close. The second vision did not transport Harry back in time. Instead, it brought the past to him. Tom looked around the dormitory, taking in every detail as if memorizing the present. Then he made an offer that turned the diary from a relic into a temptation. "Do you want to see Hogwarts as it truly was? Let me show you the castle without them." There was no sound, yet the atmosphere thickened, and the room seemed to breathe with anticipation. The castle walls themselves began to shimmer. In the corner of the frame, according to notes from the script, the Gryffindor banners dissolved into Slytherin green. For a moment, Harry could see Hogwarts through Riddle's eyes, pure, cold, and orderly. There were no Muggle-born students, no laughter in the Great Hall, only the echo of discipline and pride. It was the vision of a world Riddle believed he could perfect. This was not a flashback. It was persuasion disguised as history. The diary was not merely showing memories, it was rewriting perception. Harry, overwhelmed, felt his will slipping. The quill in his hand moved on its own, sketching shapes he did not understand, symbols like serpents twisted into letters. Then, with a surge of panic, he pulled the quill away. The illusion shattered. That instant, the quill snapping from the diary's grasp, was the climax of the deleted sequence. The moment Harry broke free symbolized the last resistance of his independent mind. In the editing room, however, this power made Riddle too real too soon. The filmmakers feared that audiences would no longer see the diary as a mystery, but as an already living villain. Yet from a storytelling perspective, That scene revealed the true horror of the artifact. It was not memory at all. It was consciousness waiting to live again through another mind. J.K. Rowling herself described the diary later as a Horcrux before Voldemort knew the word. That is precisely what this lost scene emphasized. The diary did not only contain Riddle's recollections, it carried a fragment of his soul, eager to manipulate and consume. In the novel, Rowling hinted at this danger subtly when Dumbledore said, "It is not wise to trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain." The cut sequence visualized that warning. Viewers would have witnessed a tangible intelligence manipulating Harry's emotions in real time long before the Chamber's final confrontation. Had the scene remained, the emotional undercurrent of the film might have shifted. Instead of viewing the diary as a clever magical trick, audiences would have sensed the sinister agency behind it. Tom's words, "You trust them, but they do not trust you," would have echoed through the later scenes, deepening Harry's alienation. The diary would no longer seem like a passive clue leading to the Chamber, but an active antagonist probing Harry's vulnerabilities, learning from him. It was, in essence, the beginning of a conversation between Voldemort and his future nemesis, conducted not through power, but through persuasion. The artistry of the deleted moment also lay in its visual symbolism. The diary, small and ordinary, lay open on the desk like an innocent object, yet it created illusions strong enough to alter the physical world. The transformation of Hogwarts into Riddle's idealized vision, cold corridors, strict order, and silence, served as a haunting metaphor for fascism hidden behind elegance. Riddle did not need to shout or threaten, he seduced through the promise of purity. Harry's act of tearing the quill from the diary's hold became a quiet rebellion against that ideology. It is significant that the prop department designed the diary with faint serpentine embossing along the spine, details barely visible on screen. During this deleted scene, those patterns were intended to shimmer faintly as Tom appeared. The diary would have seemed almost alive, its texture pulsing like skin. Such imagery hinted at the organic nature of Horcrux magic, dark, parasitic, and intelligent. In later films, especially Half-Blood Prince, this concept became explicit, but Chamber of Secrets nearly showed it years earlier. The editors later admitted that removing the scene preserved the film's mystery, but sacrificed psychological depth. Without it, viewers saw only the diary's surface, a window into the past, while the novel suggested something more dangerous. In Rowling's text, Harry often describes a strange fascination with the diary, even longing to write in it again. He could not explain why, the book reads, but the diary had become a friend. The deleted sequence would have given that line a visual truth. It would have shown how addiction to understanding, to secrets, can enslave even the purest mind. What makes this lost moment so haunting is how it mirrored Voldemort's manipulation throughout the series. The diary's voice echoed his later tactics with Ginny Weasley, whispering comfort, asking for trust, draining her will. The second attempt was the bridge between curiosity and possession. Harry resisted, but only barely. Ginny, younger and lonelier, would not. This parallel would have strengthened the tragedy of her subplot and foreshadowed Voldemort's return as a being who thrives on emotional weakness, not just magical power. In some versions of the script, the vision ended with Tom watching Harry leave the dormitory, a faint smile forming on his lips. Even without physical form, Riddle understood that he had planted the seed of doubt. That expression, subtle and confident, was meant to mirror the smile Voldemort gives years later in Deathly Hallows Part 2, when he senses Harry's fear. The cycle of manipulation was complete. By cutting the scene, the film maintained suspense, but it also removed this early glimpse into Voldemort's psychology, the predator studying his prey through charm rather than cruelty. Had this moment survived the final edit, it might have changed how audiences perceived Tom Riddle entirely. Instead of being remembered only as a handsome, polite student with hidden malice, he would have been seen as a proto-Voldemort, a creature of persuasion, already capable of spiritual invasion. His voice would have lingered in the mind long after the credits rolled, not as a memory, but as a presence. The diaries whisper, "They do not trust you, Harry," would have foreshadowed every moment of doubt Harry faced in later years, from the Ministry's denial in Order of the Phoenix to the suspicion of his friends in Deathly Hallows. The scene's deletion was an editorial decision, not a creative failure. But in studying it, one sees how close the story came to revealing the diary's true essence. It was not simply an enchanted notebook, it was a living echo of a boy who refused to die. The second attempt at communication was Tom Riddle's first step toward resurrection, the moment his shadow almost touched the world of the living again. Through one line of ink, "You trust them, but they do not trust you." And he reminded us that evil rarely begins with violence. It begins with a whisper that sounds like understanding. Number 23, Dumbledore's letter via Fawkes. When Dumbledore was forced to leave Hogwarts in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the castle seemed to lose part of its magic. The headmaster's absence cast a shadow over the stone corridors, and even the portraits appeared quieter, as if mourning the departure of the man who had guided them for so long. But among the early drafts of the screenplay, there was once a scene that offered a silent thread of hope, a brief but poignant moment that never reached the final cut. It was a letter carried not by Owl, but by the fiery wings of Fawkes, Dumbledore's loyal phoenix. In this deleted scene, Fawkes appeared before Harry, delivering a message that shimmered with the warmth of his master's wisdom. Sometimes the light goes out so that you may learn to cherish it. Trust your heart, Harry. The tone of this moment was unlike anything else in the film. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, filled with stillness and the faint hum of something divine. The setting was described as the Gryffindor common room late at night. The fire had burned down to embers, and Harry sat alone, staring into the darkness, wrestling with doubt. He had been blamed, suspected, and left without the protection of the one adult he fully trusted. That was when a soft rustling broke the silence. From the shadows above the fireplace, Fawkes descended, his feathers glowing with faint gold, the air shimmering with warmth, as if the room itself had drawn a breath of life. No words were exchanged, only the sound of wings folding and the faint crackle of a letter sealed with wax. Bearing the crest of Hogwarts. The text of Dumbledore's letter was brief, but its weight was enormous. The message encapsulated what Dumbledore often taught Harry throughout the series, that even in the darkest times, the smallest spark of faith could change everything. It was an echo of his later words in The Prisoner of Azkaban. Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one only remembers to turn on the light. The removed scene thus served as a kind of emotional bridge between the books and the later wisdom that Dumbledore would share. It showed that even when he was absent, his presence guided Harry in invisible ways. Imagine that night. Harry unfolds the parchment, the handwriting unmistakable, flowing, deliberate, and yet full of warmth. The ink glows faintly, as though it carried the remnants of Fawkes's light. The message doesn't give instructions, doesn't reveal secrets, doesn't tell Harry how to act. Instead, it plants an idea, a feeling that light exists even when unseen, and that the heart can be trusted when the mind is clouded by fear. When Harry looks up, Fawkes is gone, leaving only a few shimmering feathers that slowly turn to ash. The scene was meant to be both symbolic and prophetic. The bird that would later save his life had already delivered a gift, the courage to believe. The decision to remove this scene came from a place of cinematic reasoning. Director Chris Columbus and screenwriter Steve Kloves wanted the final act in the chamber to feel unexpected, almost miraculous. Fawkes' sudden arrival in the underground chamber, healing Harry's wound and bringing the sorting hat, was designed to strike the audience with the full power of surprise. If viewers had already seen Fawkes in an earlier moment, that surprise would have been softened. Yet by cutting it, something tender was lost. The invisible thread of connection between Dumbledore and Harry in the darkest chapter of his second year. There's a striking beauty in how this missing moment mirrors Dumbledore's character. Throughout the series, he never imposes his will directly. Instead, he inspires, nudges, and trusts that others will find their own way. This scene would have shown exactly that, his faith in Harry's instincts. The line, "Trust your heart, Harry," resonates deeply with the theme of the Chamber of Secrets. The entire story revolves around the battle between fear and courage, manipulation and truth. While others doubted Harry, Dumbledore silently believed in him. The letter would have symbolized that unseen belief. What makes this cut scene especially fascinating is how it transforms the perception of Fawkes. In the released film, Fawkes appears as a kind of deus ex machina, a miraculous creature emerging from nowhere to save the hero. But with this additional scene, the Phoenix becomes more than a plot device. He becomes a messenger of faith. His flight through the castle's cold corridors, carrying Dumbledore's note, would have connected the school's despairing heart to a spark of unseen guidance. The symbolism is rich. The Phoenix, a bird of rebirth, carrying words that remind Harry that light returns even after darkness. It's a perfect metaphor for the soul of the story. The imagery described in the draft script paints Fawkes as both ethereal and grounded in emotion. His feathers were to cast faint reflections on the portrait's eyes, making them flicker as if alive again. The embers in the fireplace were to reignite slightly when he appeared, suggesting that hope itself was being rekindled. Harry's eyes, filled with tears and exhaustion, would glow faintly in the light. This was meant to be a purely visual form of communication between teacher and student, a lesson conveyed not through dialogue but through presence. It's a kind of cinematic poetry, silent yet heavy with meaning. In literary terms, this missing letter aligns with Dumbledore's recurring role as the invisible mentor archetype. He doesn't rescue Harry, he reminds him that the strength lies within. The same pattern reappears in later books, when Dumbledore leaves clues for Harry in The Half-Blood Prince, or when his portrait subtly guides him in The Deathly Hallows. This deleted scene would have been the first moment to establish that pattern on screen. Dumbledore is the ever-watchful guardian who trusts the power of human intuition over rules and authority. It would also have deepened the emotional weight of his later death, showing that even in absence, he remains the moral compass of the story. Fans who have studied early drafts often note how the tone of this scene parallels moments from J.K. Rowling's writing. In the book, when Harry says, "It's our choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities," Dumbledore embodies the belief that guidance comes through understanding, not control. The letter's message, though never printed in the canon, carries the same spirit. The metaphor of light extinguishing only to be appreciated mirrors the heart of the Chamber of Secrets, the fear of darkness, the threat of silence, and the rediscovery of courage. Had this moment remained, it would have also changed how the audience perceived Harry's state of mind. The film largely portrays him as reactive, haunted by voices, accused by peers, unsure of his place. The letter would have added a subtle shift. It would show Harry not only enduring, but reflecting. He would have read the words and understood that he wasn't truly alone. That quiet confidence would make his later bravery in entering the chamber feel more self-driven, more rooted in belief rather than desperation. It would show the seed of the hero's maturity. There's also a mythic quality to the Phoenix's appearance that aligns with classic storytelling traditions. In ancient legends, the Phoenix arrives not simply to save, but to guide, its fire representing purification and renewal. Fawkes's brief visit would have foreshadowed his later rebirth from ashes and his eventual role in saving Harry's life. The spark of light he left behind in the common room would become literal fire in the chamber, healing Harry's wound. The narrative symmetry is elegant, first emotional salvation, then physical. The visual team reportedly even designed concept art for the scene. Fawkes was to appear in a cascade of golden embers, his wings brushing against the ceiling, leaving faint trails of light. The letter was described as gently burning around the edges as Harry read it, the words glowing until they disappeared. It was meant to vanish entirely, leaving nothing behind but the memory. This disappearing act would underline Dumbledore's mysterious nature, how his wisdom leaves no trace but forever changes those who receive it. There's a sense of melancholy in knowing that the world never saw this moment. Yet, its absence adds its own kind of beauty. Just as Dumbledore's message suggests that one must lose light to understand its worth, the scene's removal makes us appreciate its message all the more. By hiding this tenderness, the filmmakers inadvertently created the same effect the letter describes. We miss the light because it's gone, and in missing it, we value it. The unseen becomes powerful precisely because it remains unseen. This lost letter encapsulates what makes the Harry Potter series timeless. Its quiet faith in the human heart. Dumbledore's wisdom is never about grandeur or power, it's about courage born from understanding. His letter, short as it was, captured a truth that defines the series. Light and darkness coexist, and it is choice, not circumstance, that gives meaning. Even erased from the film, the spirit of that message lingers. We can almost imagine Fawkes's wings unfolding in the night, his song echoing through the empty halls of Hogwarts, carrying a reminder that guidance often comes not from what we see, but from what we feel. Number 24, Potions Class, Clash with Snape. In the dim, potion-scented classroom beneath the castle, there once existed a moment that few fans of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets ever saw. It was not filled with explosions nor spells, but with tension, raw, human, and unguarded. During one of Professor Snape's classes, Harry Potter and Ron Weasley attempted to brew what should have been a simple concoction, the Forgetfulness Potion. What unfolded, however, was a clash of pride and resentment, one so charged that director Chris Columbus ultimately chose to cut it from the final version of the film. Yet that decision left behind a ghost of what could have been one of the most powerful insights into the fragile relationship between Harry and Severus Snape. The brewing lesson had already been going poorly. Ron's cauldron emitted a faint green smoke that suggested something had gone wrong. The other students snickered, particularly Draco Malfoy, who sat nearby with a smug expression, stirring his perfectly balanced mixture. Snape, tall and menacing in his black robes, stalked between the tables, his eyes glittering with a cruel satisfaction that only came from watching others fail. He stopped behind Harry's desk, peering into the cauldron as though looking for an excuse to humiliate him. The class fell into silence, waiting for the inevitable. "Pathetic," Snape said in his cold, silken tone, his lip curling. His voice echoed against the dungeon walls, slicing through the nervous atmosphere. He accused Harry and Ron of lacking the most basic comprehension of magical balance. In the script, this was meant to be a moment where Harry's patience snapped. For 2 years he had endured Snape's contempt, the endless jabs about his father, and the humiliations that filled every potion lesson. But this time, something inside him refused to stay silent. In that lost scene, Harry looked directly at Snape, his voice quiet but steady. He told him that perhaps they might improve if you ever explained what we were doing wrong. It was not rebellion. It was honesty, spoken without fear. The silence that followed was described by the crew as electric. Even Malfoy, who was accustomed to mocking Harry at every opportunity, fell still. Snape's eyes darkened, and he took a slow, deliberate step closer, his face expressionless, but his fury palpable. Then in a whisper, filled with venom, he said, "You are just like your father, and that is not a compliment." What makes this deleted moment so haunting is not merely the words, but what they reveal. Throughout the series, Snape's hatred of Harry is a complicated mixture of grief, jealousy, and bitterness, a man haunted by a past that never healed. This brief exchange condensed all of that emotion into a single, unforgettable encounter. The line, "You are just like your father," echoes the heart of Snape's torment. He sees in Harry not the innocent boy, but the shadow of James Potter, the rival who once humiliated him, the man who won the woman he loved. This was the curse of recognition. Every glance at Harry's eyes reminded Snape of Lily, but every smirk, every act of bravery reminded him of James. The deleted scene allowed viewers to glimpse that fracture, an emotion too human for the mask of authority Snape wore. What is remarkable is how Daniel Radcliffe's portrayal, even in rehearsal footage, reportedly conveyed both courage and fear. Harry's response was not that of a hero challenging his enemy, but of a boy trying to understand why he was always despised. There was no defiance in his eyes, only confusion, and in that confusion lay the heart of their story. It was the first real confrontation that wasn't about house points or detentions, but about identity. Harry was beginning to realize that being his father's son was both a blessing and a burden. Snape's whisper, too, carried layers of meaning that the audience was never meant to unpack so early in the series. It was not only an insult, it was a confession. The way Alan Rickman delivered the line, according to those present, was chillingly quiet, more sorrowful than angry. There was a flicker of something like regret in his eyes. Rickman always played Snape as a man who was fighting himself, not merely his enemies. The venom he spat was directed as much inward as outward. By removing the scene, Columbus preserved Snape's enigma for later films, but also sacrificed one of the first hints of his humanity. From a storytelling perspective, the moment would have deepened the rhythm of the Chamber of Secrets. At this point in the story, Harry was already wrestling with the whispers of the Parseltongue, the fear that he might be connected to Slytherin's heir, and the dread of the mysterious chamber itself. Snape's accusation would have added another wound to that growing uncertainty, suggesting that Harry's lineage might not only be heroic, but dangerous. The bitterness in Snape's words would have reinforced the question haunting Harry, who am I really? The film that was released preferred to keep the tone adventurous, saving the darker introspection for Alfonso Cuarón's Prisoner of Azkaban. Quaron's later approach indeed expanded on what Columbus restrained. The tension between Harry and Snape in The Prisoner of Azkaban carried echoes of that deleted moment. When Snape blocks Harry from danger in the Shrieking Shack, or when he shouts, "Turn out your pockets!" during the Marauders map scene, those emotions trace back to that same classroom humiliation. The deleted scene, therefore, functions almost like an unseen prelude to their later encounters. It was the spark before the storm, the quiet recognition of mutual pain that neither could articulate. It is worth recalling that in J.K. Rowling's novels, Harry himself often thinks of Snape with a confusing mix of hatred and curiosity. He sees glimpses of something deeper in his teacher's eyes. In The Order of the Phoenix, Harry later reads through Snape's memories and discovers that much of the hatred came from pain. That revelation hits harder when one remembers that early spark, the classroom whisper, the reminder of James, and the humiliation that concealed a broken man's grief. The deleted scene might have made that later revelation even more tragic. It would have reminded viewers that from the very beginning, Snape was not the villain he seemed, but a man drowning in memory. Cinematically, the scene also reflected the atmosphere that defined the early films. Columbus's direction emphasized warmth and nostalgia, but beneath the candlelight and magic, there was a slow undercurrent of darkness. The potions dungeon was a world of shadows and reflections, iron cauldrons, flickering lamps, and cold stone walls. In that light, Snape's figure was almost ghost-like, looming over the students like a spectre of their future fears. The scene's removal softened that edge, preserving the innocence of the film, but diluting its psychological weight. What makes the scene even more significant is its parallel to a similar exchange in The Prisoner of Azkaban. When Snape snarls that Harry's arrogance reminds him of his father, Harry responds with anger, accusing Snape of jealousy. That confrontation exists because the emotional foundation had already been laid in the deleted Chamber of Secrets moment. One can imagine how much more powerful the later scene would have felt if audiences had already seen this first wound opened years earlier. The continuity between those moments, the echo of the same insult, the same suppressed rage, would have drawn a haunting line through their relationship. For fans of filmcraft, Columbus's decision was understandable. The director wanted to maintain the story's balance between wonder and fear, and perhaps feared that showing too much of Snape's cruelty too soon might alienate younger viewers. He later admitted that he wanted the third film to carry the emotional growth of the characters. Still, it is fascinating to imagine how this missing moment could have subtly shifted the entire tone of the series. Snape's humanity would have been glimpsed earlier, Harry's confusion would have deepened, and the emotional complexity of Hogwarts would have unfolded more gradually. Even among the actors, there were discussions about the power of the exchange. Rickman, who had already been told by J.K. Rowling about Snape's true allegiance, understood the weight behind his words. To him, that whisper was not cruelty, it was sorrow, disguised as disdain. Radcliffe, meanwhile, remembered feeling terrified but strangely proud during the filming. He later described it as one of the first moments where he felt Harry was standing up for himself not as the boy who lived, but as a student demanding fairness. The deleted footage, though never officially released, was rumored to be one of Rickman's most nuanced performances in the early series. Had it remained, it might have been remembered as one of the franchise's defining exchanges. Instead, it lives on in the margins of scripts and interviews, a fragment of character history that enriches what fans already know. When Snape later dies in the Deathly Hallows and Harry calls his son Albus Severus, viewers remember the pain, the redemption, the long road from hatred to understanding. This missing classroom moment would have been the perfect foreshadowing of that transformation, the first flicker of empathy hidden beneath layers of anger and loss. In that dark dungeon, surrounded by the smell of burnt potion and fear, two destinies clashed not through magic, but through words. One boy searching for respect and one man haunted by love and betrayal. The cauldron bubbled, the class remained silent, and between them hung the sentence that would echo for years. "You are just like your father." It was never meant to be a compliment, but it was perhaps the most human truth Severus Snape ever spoke. Number 25. Dormitory Heart to Heart. In the whirlwind of magic and mystery that fills the pages of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, there exists a scene that never made it to the screen, but one that feels integral to understanding the heart of the characters, the conversation in the Gryffindor boys' dormitory after the dramatic events of the dueling club. This scene is not just another moment of magic, it is a deeply human exchange that showcases the emotional turmoil Harry is experiencing, and it reflects the quiet strength of his friends. The scene is an exploration of doubt, fear, and the power of friendship in times of uncertainty. After Harry's duel with Draco Malfoy in the club, his mind is racing. He is left in a state of confusion and unease, unsure of his own identity, of his place in the magical world, and even of the morality that governs his actions. His confrontation with the snake, the parseltongue that has mysteriously spoken to him, echoes a question that has been haunting Harry for some time. Could he be like the dark wizards that have shaped his life, like Lord Voldemort? Could the blood of Salazar Slytherin run through his veins? These thoughts linger in his mind as he climbs the staircase to the Gryffindor Tower, where his friends are waiting for him. Ron and Neville, always loyal, are the first to approach him when he enters the dormitory. They sense that Harry is troubled, but they can't fully grasp the depth of his anxiety. Harry, usually the picture of bravery and quick-wittedness, seems fragile in this moment. He sits down heavily on his bed, his face a mixture of confusion and self-doubt. The events of the dueling club, where he had involuntarily spoken in Parseltongue, have shaken him to his core. In the midst of all the magical excitement, Harry is left to face the uncomfortable truth. He might share a connection with the very wizard who killed his parents. In a voice filled with uncertainty, Harry mutters aloud, "Maybe I am a Slytherin. The snake listened to me. I spoke Parseltongue." The words tumble out before he can stop them, his mind desperately searching for an answer to the question that's been gnawing at him for weeks. In that moment, Harry feels isolated, as if the world around him is spinning out of control. A part of him is terrified that his connection to the Slytherin house, symbolized by the snake, marks him as something dark and dangerous. He can't help but wonder if he is destined for the same path that Voldemort once walked. Ron, ever the source of comfort and humor, quickly responds with a sense of calm that Harry doesn't expect. "If you were a Slytherin," he says, his tone steady, "you wouldn't be sitting here tearing yourself up about it." The words are simple, yet profoundly kind. In a world where self-doubt is a constant companion for Harry, Ron's reassurance is like a warm hand on his shoulder. Ron doesn't just dismiss Harry's concerns, he gently reminds him that the very fact that Harry is struggling with this thought shows that he is far from being like Slytherin. The remark is a rare moment of true warmth from Ron, one that reflects the depth of their friendship. It's not just a witty comeback, it's a reminder that Harry's heart is good, even if his mind is clouded by fear and confusion. Yet despite Ron's attempt to reassure him, Harry can't shake the gnawing sense of unease. This doubt doesn't just come from his experience with the snake, It stems from something deeper, something buried within him since he first learned about his parents' death. Harry has always felt like an outsider, someone who doesn't quite belong in the wizarding world, despite being the boy who lived. The weight of his fame has always been both a gift and a curse. He has never had the luxury of simply being a child, free from the expectations and the shadow of Voldemort. In this moment, he feels as though he is not just living in the past, but being haunted by it, with every step leading him closer to something he can't yet understand. The conversation in the dormitory, though brief, is crucial to understanding Harry's character. It is not just about a boy doubting his own nature, it's about the conflict between fear and self-identity. Harry's vulnerability, in these quiet moments with his friends, exposes a side of him that the world rarely sees.
He is not just a hero in the making, he is a young man learning to navigate the complexities of good and evil, of what it means to be defined by your choices rather than your lineage. And it is here, in the shared silence and concern of his friends, that Harry begins to take his first steps toward understanding that he is more than the expectations placed upon him. Neville, who has always been a loyal but often overlooked companion, is also there in the dormitory, though his presence is subtle. He doesn't speak much in this moment, but his concern for Harry is clear. Neville, too, understands the weight of self-doubt. For him, the struggle is not about whether he might be like Slytherin, but about his own insecurities and fears. His presence in the room serves as a reminder that even those who are often seen as the underdogs or the sidekicks are integral to the support system that Harry needs in moments of crisis. Neville's quiet support, alongside Ron's more vocal reassurance, creates a bond of friendship that runs deeper than any magical spell or confrontation. The decision to cut this scene from the film adaptation was a significant one, especially considering how much it adds to the emotional development of the characters. The warmth of Ron's response is one of the many small but powerful moments that make the Harry Potter series not just about magic, but about human connection.
The filmmakers likely felt that similar sentiments were expressed later in the story, particularly in the scene with Hermione in the common room, but this moment in the dormitory holds a particular kind of intimacy. It is unguarded and private, far from the public eyes of the rest of Hogwarts. It allows for a quiet reflection of the bonds between Harry and his closest friends. The altered pacing of the film, focused on action and the grandeur of the Chamber of Secrets itself, undoubtedly made this moment seem extraneous. Yet for those who have read the books, the scene carries significant emotional weight. It shows Harry's internal struggle at its rawest, and Ron's capacity for empathy shines through. The way Ron is able to both provide comfort and assert that Harry's worth is not tied to his bloodline demonstrates a profound understanding of what true friendship means. This moment is also an important turning point in the narrative of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. It marks the moment when Harry begins to understand that his connection to Slytherin's bloodline doesn't define him. That connection is not a curse, it is just a part of who he is, and it is his actions, not his heritage, that will define his future. This understanding is echoed later in the book when Harry ultimately rejects the darkness of Slytherin House, choosing instead to stand by the values of Gryffindor. But this brief conversation in the Gryffindor dormitory lays the groundwork for that choice. It is in these quiet, tender moments with his friends that Harry learns the most about himself. In the end, this deleted scene serves as a poignant reminder that Harry's journey is not just one of external conflict, but of internal discovery. His friends' unwavering support, especially in moments of doubt, is the bedrock on which his resilience is built. Ron's simple yet profound response encapsulates the heart of what it means to be a true friend, to stand by someone, not despite their flaws, but because of them. It is a message that resonates not just within the world of Hogwarts, but in the hearts of readers everywhere. Number 26. The Ghosts of Hogwarts. The halls of Hogwarts were always filled with whispers and secrets, but there were some voices that even the living could never hear. The ghosts of the school, who had once walked its halls as students or teachers, now drifted through the corridors, locked in their eternal states of existence. Their spectral forms were known to most, often seen gliding through walls or appearing in the most unexpected places, but in the original script of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, a chilling scene was meant to reveal more about these otherworldly residents and their complex roles within the walls of Hogwarts. Harry Potter had never been one to shy away from the mysteries of the castle, and one particular evening, while walking down a deserted corridor, he found himself once again drawn to the ethereal figures that haunted the school. His footsteps echoed lightly, but it wasn't the silence of the corridor that caught his attention. It was the faint sound of arguing, a low murmur that seemed to carry from the shadows just beyond his reach. Intrigued, Harry moved quietly, his curiosity outweighing any apprehension about the unsettling presence of the ghosts. As he drew closer, the faint voices became clearer. The first figure to emerge from the shadows was none other than Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington, known more commonly as Nearly Headless Nick. The ghost was infamous not only for his death. He had been beheaded, but his executioner's axe had been dull, resulting in a very botched beheading, but also for his constant desire for company. Though kind-hearted, he had a tendency to cling to the idea of socializing and fitting in with the living. Now, as Harry peered from the shadows, he saw Nick engaged in a heated discussion with another ghost, one far more intimidating. The second ghost, the Bloody Baron, was much darker. His robes were stained with blood, and his solemn, haunting figure cast a long shadow down the corridor. There was an air of fear that accompanied his every movement, and his eyes, dark and emotionless, held a strange power over the other ghosts. He was the ghost of Slytherin House, and unlike Nick's eager attempts to blend in with the living world, the Baron was a figure of dread, one who seemed to hold sway over the spirits that lingered in the halls of Hogwarts. From where Harry stood, half hidden in the gloom, he could hear the faint voices of the two ghosts rising in a sharp exchange. Sir Nicholas was insisting that the recent attacks on students, those terrifying attacks which had left many in fear for their lives, were the work of someone alive, someone still walking the halls. His voice was filled with urgency, as if the weight of the matter had finally struck him. "It must be someone in the school," Nick declared, his voice tinged with worry. "There's no other explanation. We must look to the living." The Bloody Baron, on the other hand, was less than convinced. He scoffed at Nick's suggestion, his voice low and dangerous. "You speak as though you know, Nicholas," he hissed, his tone full of contempt. "You have no understanding of the darkness that stirs beneath the surface of this castle. It is not a human who is responsible for this." There was a deep, cold bitterness in his words, a sharp contrast to Nick's more earnest plea. The Baron's presence alone was enough to send shivers down anyone's spine, but his words carried an even greater weight. Darkness was something he understood, and something he seemed to feel with every fibre of his being. The argument between the two ghosts grew colder, more intense, as each tried to assert their viewpoint. Nick, always the gentleman, was trying to be reasonable, but the Baron's anger was palpable. His voice came in short, clipped sentences, his coldness cutting through the air. "You fear what you cannot understand," the bloody Baron sneered. "You, Nicholas, are terrified of your own existence, and you will never grasp the true darkness that lurks in this place." Nick's response was sharp, his words now tinged with a quiet, hurt pride. "I fear nothing, Baron," he shot back, though there was a tremor in his voice. "Not even death can claim me as its own." "Then why do you tremble in my presence?" the Baron retorted, his voice dripping with disdain. The tension between the two ghosts was thick, and Harry could feel it as if it had settled in the very air around him. There was something haunting about the way the two spectres interacted, as if their ancient histories and lingering regrets were still at war. For a moment, Harry almost forgot where he was, caught in the invisible battle between light and dark, life and death. But the tension broke as Nick finally backed down, his shoulders slumping slightly. He wasn't afraid, but he could see that this wasn't a battle he would win. "Perhaps it's not for us to understand, Baron," Nick said quietly. "But we must still do something. If there's something in the castle, something we cannot see, something ancient, then we must warn the students. They don't know what's coming." For a moment, the bloody Baron was silent, his eyes narrowing as if weighing Nick's words carefully. His lips twitched, but he did not respond immediately. Harry, watching this exchange from the shadows, was struck by the stark contrast between the two. Sir Nicholas, a ghost who had spent centuries seeking companionship and acceptance, and the bloody Baron, a being consumed by his own darkness and the consequences of his past, were two sides of the same spectral coin. They represented the division within Hogwarts itself, the old, noble tradition of the ghosts who sought to protect and guide the living, and the ominous, sometimes terrifying force that lingered, never to be understood. As Harry continued to watch, he noticed something even more unsettling. The ghosts around him, from the nearly headless Nick to the haunting Baron, all seemed to tremble in their own way. They were not simply wandering spirits, they too were afraid. The cold that gripped Hogwarts was not just the chill of the dungeon corridors or the icy wind that howled through the halls. It was something deeper, something that seemed to seep into the very stones of the castle itself. Even the dead were not immune to fear. This moment, this brief exchange between Sir Nicholas and the bloody Baron, would have added a powerful layer of mystery to the Chamber of Secrets. It would have painted a darker, more complex picture of Hogwarts, showing that even the dead were not free from the terror that gripped the school. In a way, it would have been a reminder that no one, not even those who had passed on, were beyond the reach of the horrors lurking within the walls of the castle. However, this scene, filled with tension and haunting atmosphere, was ultimately cut from the final film. The filmmakers, likely conscious of the need to keep the pacing moving for their younger audience, chose to remove it. As a result, the film only briefly hints at the eerie presence of Hogwarts ghosts, never fully exploring their depth or the tension that simmered beneath the surface of their ethereal existence. The loss of this scene, while understandable in the context of a film aimed at younger viewers, deprived the audience of a chilling glimpse into the hidden fears of Hogwarts, fears that even after death still lingered in its haunted halls.